Welcome to the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast with Ron and Kristen, where leadership meets entertainment. This podcast features stories with names and certain aspects that have been changed to keep submissions private. Enjoy the show.
Welcome back to the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast, where leadership meets entertainment. I'm Kristen Sokoloff here with my co-host Ron Ward, and today we are talking strategy with a guest who knows how to turn ideas into an advantage. John Whitt, chess champion and author of Checkmate, Translating Ideas into Money.
That's
Cha-ching.
right.
Love it.
John has 40 years of experience leading transformations, and what makes him stand out is how he uses chess to teach leadership, growth, and clarity in decision-making. John, glad to have you here.
Ron, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you. And it's a pleasure to find out that Kristen lives literally right down the street.
I know, it's crazy. Literally had no idea. So we're going to have to get coffee.
Yeah.
I'll drive to the Couve.
Okay.
Oh, okay. So let's talk about chess as a metaphor for business. So I want to know, when did the light bulb first go off for you that a chess strategy could translate into business wins?
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you. Well, I spent 30 years in corporate doing really large projects for Bank of America, TRW, construction, corporate real estate. And then I moved into technology to build systems that keep track of all that information in that construction real estate. And the interesting thing was that the system and the process for building a building at the highest level is the same as the process for doing a technology project. So a project's a project. And then when you look at a project, there's a goal. There's a reason why we're doing this. We're trying to achieve X, Y, Z, whatever that happens to be. And you have to marshal your resources, people, cash, inventory, et cetera. And the more effectively you marshal those resources, the more effectively you put them in the right place, the more likely it is that and the faster that you achieve your goal. So it's very similar to chess. In chess, the goal is, except that chess, the goal is always the same. It's capture the king. The goal change, whether it's a project or when you're running a business, your target changes, but it's still, you have a certain amount of resources, and the more effectively you put them into their place, the more likely it is that you're going to achieve your target. Now, the other thing is in business or in chess, it's very clear that your target is the king. That's it. And in business, people aren't always that clear about what the goal really is. And that's why the first step in all of these processes, and I think true in just so many things, is just clarity, getting super clear, not a little clear, but super clear on what you're trying to achieve and who's going to do it and when and all those parts and pieces.
Wow. That's super interesting.
Yeah, Kristen and I use the term aces and spaces. You got to get people who align well with and have the knowledge to complete the task. I like that. It's kind of like a sports team. You want the best in each position.
Players, A-level players.
That's right.
You want A players, and then if you want A players, you got to be an A-level leader.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that
Perfect.
tracks.
Perfect segue.
Yeah. So I know there's a myriad of things that can go wrong, but when leaders fail to see the board, what's the single most costly mistake that they make?
Not resetting. I mean, if they don't see the board, then they either don't have the skill set themselves, or they don't have the resources around them to be able to see the board. More often, they see the board in a snapshot, like this is what it looks like, this is what I want to do. But life changes. Life changes like the second you look away from the board. And so you have to be ready to change with it. And if you don't have a system and a process, and this is where I see businesses fall down all the time, they don't have a system and a process to routinely or frequently adjust, course correct. And so it's really hard to land the plane, right? So if you're flying a plane from New York to LA, it's off course all the time, but autopilot continues to correct it, and you land the plane in Los Angeles. But if you don't have that autopilot feature, function, change management system in place, and depending on the size of the project, it could be weekly and it could be more frequently than that. You could look up a month from now and be 30 miles off target.
Would you assimilate that to like a stress test, or completely different?
Yeah, I don't know that I would liken it to a stress test as much. Um, if you're measuring stress, so I'm just going to go a path. I had heart surgery about 5 years ago, and so I had to do the treadmill stress test thing, and it just measures how clogged things are, and so that you're off target or on target, and then they design systems to put you back on target. So in that way, I think it's a little bit of a stress test. You have to course correct, because if you don't,
Right.
if I didn't, I don't know if I'd be here.
Right.
Hey, John, along the lines, just as a follow-up, when Kristen mentioned stress tests, you always have, I assume, historical projects, unless you're doing something completely innovative. How does that come into play?
Well, I think you look at your historical projects to see, how did you accomplish what you needed? What were the resources that you had? So a lot of times we're going to use last project's resources again, because we know who they are, we can trust them, we know what they can do. And so, the past will repeat itself unless you make some changes. But I think you look at the past to help guide the future.
Yeah,
Amen.
absolutely.
Isn't that true? I mean, with history itself. Can you share a time when applying a chess principle directly led to measurable revenue growth for you or for one of your clients?
Well, so I'm going to go to the book and then kind of relate back to the. So the book talks about, the first thing you have to have is mindset. You have to have the right attitude. And as a business owner, you got to have a tougher skin than most. And it's really what I call the attitude of a champion. If you don't have the willingness and the desire to overcome adversity, it's just going to knock you sideways. But the other thing that happens is you have to be willing to make mistakes, because whenever you're doing something new, whenever you're learning something new, is when you most likely make mistakes. And you have to be able to adjust those. And that's that course correction process. And so when I was building banks, and the first bank branch that you build, between the design and the implementation, the execution, build, it takes a long time. But by the time you do the 10th one, it goes pretty quick, right? All of those plans and strategies are copy and paste type models. And that's where you really sit there and say, can I turn this into again, the faster you get the bank on the branch, the faster you get depositors, the faster you grow, that turns into revenue. So if you use the copy paste model, same resources, same teams, with adjustments, improvements, you're going to generate more and more, whatever your goal is for.
There's so much parallelism here, because I had a 20-year banking career here in the Northwest. And I heard you mention Bank of America earlier. I worked there for 6-7 years. Curious if you ever built any of the branches in Oregon.
I did not have that portfolio.
Okay.
I didn't have the Northwest. I had California, Northern, Southern California, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas.
That's a large footprint for sure.
We have 15,000 Bank of America properties in that space, and about 10% of them are under construction of some sort at any one time. So you're running 1,500 projects at a time. And you have to have a system that is, really, it's lather, rinse, repeat. If you have to reinvent the wheel on every one of those, you're not going to get them done.
Right. That's a great point.
So, John, let's talk personnel a little bit. We know that using this chess metaphor, each person plays a very unique role, from the pawn to the queen. How is personnel? Are people specialized, and it's easy to put people in the right places? And I know you may not have dealt directly with personnel, but how do you get the right pieces in place, or the right people in place? And what happens if everyone thinks they're the queen or the king? Or did you deal with anything like that?
There are always people that represent challenges where they think they're more or less than what we're looking for. I work with small business. So I came out of big corporate, but I decided I'm going to take my big business tools and bring them to corporate, or bring them to small business. And it's really effective in the sense that in the corporate world, when you're identifying that you need a new hire, you go to great depth as to what you need skills, experience, knowledge. And you're going to do a lot of work on behavior characteristics. What kind of person do we need in this particular space? And we're going to look at that role that we want them to fill. And we're going to say, what kind of behavioral characteristics are going to be most effective in this role? And then we have this HR department, and we give them that information, and they go out and give us resources, and we do the interview, and we have all kinds of great questions we can ask so we get better hires. Well, the reality is that doesn't occur in the small business world. They don't, A, they don't know how to do it. They've never done it before. B, they'll tell you they don't have time to do it. But this is one of those where, why do you never have time to do it right the first time, but always time to do it again? Because that's what happens when you make a bad hire. Bad hires are maybe the most costly mistake you can make.
Yes, seriously.
We 100% agree with that. We did an episode called Help I Hired a Dud. And
that was like number 2, I think.
Yeah, that was like the second or third episode that we did, but that has haunted me. I worked with the government, John, and people can look so good on a resume and even interview extremely well. Of course, there are, I was able to massage the questions in the interview that really did start to expose some things. But I tell everyone, you better do those background checks and not just the 3 references that they give. You better go beyond that if it's an important position to your company, because you're exactly right. Your people make or break you.
Yeah, and you're depending on them. If you're talking about minimum wage person, I don't know that you need to go to that level of detail.
Right.
But if you're bringing a leader in, it's really hell when you can't get it right.
Yeah, seriously. Even with the law enforcement, my husband's with the Portland Police Department, and I hear all the time, he's one of the trainers. I hear all the time the costly the cost involved when somebody doesn't work out, and at that point they're generally a year in, right? So all of the training that has been put in for a year, and they go through in detail background checks, but sometimes you just don't see these characteristics exposed until certain aspects in training. But to your point, Ron, also, like you can really alleviate a lot of pain up front if you ask the right questions. But we're all going to be bamboozled at one time or another. So it's just bringing that percentage down as low as we can, keep it in the single digits there.
Well, you're right. We've all made bad decisions or bad buying decisions. We just try to get better, and understanding the clarity with which to get better. There's a great deal of depth that you can, if you're hiring a senior C-suite employee, C-suite executive, you better do some depth. There better be some detail. You might have an inch deep dossier on that type of person for that type of role, because it's just that critical.
They really should. And we've seen, a lot in the news where you have someone at that level who puts a Twitter out there, tweet out there, or says something. And unfortunately, even though they did it on their personal time, it represents the entire company, and it can cause stock prices to tank. It's very detrimental that we know someone's temperament. So I like what you're saying, like an inch thick. Yeah, do your research, do your due diligence.
It's just a different world. Everything is public now.
Yes.
And
Seriously.
It's not like 8 hours, clock in, clock out, balance. I want to go home and not think about working. It doesn't work with leaders.
Right.
Because it carries on, and you're on your phone and you're doing a social media thing. And we see it every day. People do stupid things.
Yeah, we do.
I just had someone contact me. They want to get into federal law enforcement. And I told them I would advise them and follow them on social media. And our first conversation, I said, you need to clean that up. They're like, what? There's nothing. I said, you're drinking, you're out partying in every video. Is that really what you want the feds to see in their hiring? They're like, oh, well, this was, they were giving me reasons. They were at the social. I said, there's a drink in your hand in every photo. So anyway.
Seriously, that's
part of the background checks.
Yeah, seriously. And with corporate, a lot of them don't do those. I see that a lot more with state or with government or, city, but I don't see it as much in corporate. I want to transition a little bit into, strategy that wins in 2025 and beyond. We just did an episode on how different things are in the past 5 years. So let's talk AI. Okay, so AI is a huge disruptor right now. We have hybrid teams to work into the fold here. Economic uncertainty has definitely been an issue over the past 5 years. What does a truly winning strategy look like right now?
Well, it's going to depend on what industry you're in and what level you need from a customer facing
Right.
standpoint. But I don't think you can ignore AI, whether you're using AI to help you write more effectively or using agents to respond quickly or faster. I don't think you could ignore that. I think that you have to, in today's global economy, you have to look at, where we're going to get the best players, right? You want the A players, right? In basketball and football, they're bringing them, baseball's bringing them in from the Dominican Republic, basketball's bringing them in from Europe, Eastern Bloc. I mean, they go wherever it takes to get the best players. And in a sense, that's what you need to do too. And I think you have to embrace it in the sense that as a leader, the old level where the person I hired sat right next to me, or I could talk to him and I could reach out. That's not available anymore. I mean, if I stay in that model, I'm going to fall behind because somebody else is going to go get those A players and they're going to take the lead and run with it.
So, John, we love stories. Could you give us an example? And maybe it might parlay into the next question. I had, a lot of leaders. And when I retired from the federal government, I had to transition. All of a sudden, I'm running a small business, and I will tell you that I had to course correct quite a bit, and
I'll
still
bet.
do, and still do. But is there a story, an analogy, without upending privacy of someone that you could tell us where you kind of walk through, especially a leader who's playing checkers when they needed to make some long-term decisions, and how you navigated that?
Well, I won't use names, but early on in my career, I was working with a manufacturing firm, a fairly good sized firm, $25 million a year in annual revenues, and they were stuck, and they engaged me to how can I break loose with this thing, and it really was a mindset that the owner brought to the organization. It was, this is how it works. This is how we do things, et cetera, et cetera. So the owner wasn't really willing to change. And the people that worked for him realized that was the case. So, creativity, innovation, all that other kind of stuff just wasn't happening. And I tell a lot of cow stories in my practice, right? So if you farmer has a range with cattle, right? And there's a stream running down the range. And so he needs to get the cattle from one side to the other. And so he builds a bridge, and the cattle walk across the bridge. And initially the cattle walk across the bridge, really single file, right? Because if they get next to the edge and they fall in, they know, even cows know that that's dangerous. And once you put guardrails up, then the cows realize that they can cross 1, 2 at a time. They don't have to, they don't have to go right down the center. Well, same thing happens. You want to create the same kind of environment in your company. In other words, we want to create the place where people can be creative, but we want to give them guardrails. And we do that with the values. What values do this company stand? How do we operate? How do we make decisions? What are the values that are important? So figure out 5 or 6 or 7, whatever those turns out to be. I like 5 because it's easy to remember. And establish those values as your guardrails, and then develop stories around each one of those values, what it means, why'd you pick that, et cetera, because that's how you communicate to your team. And now, as long as they're operating within those values, they can bring innovativeness and creativity and everything else to the party because it's in line with those values. But sometimes the things they come up with will not work because we all make mistakes, but at least they're making them for the right reasons, right? And when you're doing innovation and advancements, they don't all work out. But if you don't give them the guidelines as to how to operate, they're stuck.
I appreciate that. I have to say, I talk about this a lot. And to your point, people need to know what's expected of them. And what we see a lot is that people don't understand, employees don't know that they haven't been up to standard until their review comes up. And That is a failure of leadership, but I see this at every leadership level. It's not just low leadership. Why do you think managers fail to address these issues before the annual review or the quarterly review?
Oh, this is another great question because this happens in lots of small businesses, lots of clients. The leader believes that everybody thinks like him, that everybody has the same experiences, that everybody can solve the same problems, that it's common sense, it's this, it's that, it's the next thing. But I got to be honest with you, unless they grew up in your house, and even if you have a brother, your brother doesn't think the same way you do.
Right.
True.
And so it's a common misconception to think that they think and can process and figure things out the same way I can. And we learned that that's not the case. And so then we have to do our teaching and our training and how do we get them on board? And we realized that sometimes we hired somebody to do something and they don't have the skill sets you really needed. You just made an assumption that they have them. So, it's and then it isn't until annual review time where you come in and say, hey, well, you were supposed to do X, Y, and Z, and that didn't turn out very well. And yeah, you have to watch your assumptions.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that that you brought that up because it's so true. We think everyone's going to be self-motivated and they're going to be self-aware. And we find out, especially when we're in leadership for quite some time, that most people are not, unfortunately.
Yeah, in particular in problem solving, right? We all have different experiences. We all grew up with different experiences. I grew up in a household that was do-it-yourself household. So you had to go figure stuff out. If you wanted anything, go figure it out. We didn't have any money. So if the washer broke, you fixed it. You didn't go get another one. But clearly, some people grew up in an environment like me, and if you give them a problem, they'll figure out answers and solutions. And other people grew up in a situation where they didn't have to do that, and so they don't have the first clue how you would fix a washing machine or whatever other problem that you might have.
I have a little bit differently, but I have a lot of people reach out to me wanting to write a book, and I always say, "Who's your audience?" And it turns out they're writing the book to themselves, and or they give me the same answer. I want everybody to read this. So, we say if you're your own avatar, that's probably not going to work. You got to kind of do a little bit of market research, or at least have a goal in who is reading that book. So I always get them in the beginning to picture the reader and what they look like, what they think and act. And it does help them align because frankly, when people usually come to me and they're writing a book to everyone, they usually never finish the book, frankly. So anyway, John, here, let me ask you this. Is there one chess principle that maybe, and I know we're putting you on the spot, that maybe our listeners could try this week, something that you've seen using this chess analogy that maybe they could implement?
Well, let me share a story about the first time I had a coach. And I had sports coach was when I was in school, but I played on the chess team. It wasn't a really well-known thing, but we had a team that competed up and down the state of California, and our advisor brought in a chess coach. He was an international master, very talented.
Wow.
And he said, day one, he said, listen, my name's Ken. He gave me his background. There was 20 of us in the room. And I'm going to teach you 4 things. I'm going to teach you some things that you don't need to think about. You don't need to worry about. I'm going to teach you some things that you really should spend some time on. I'm going to go over your games with you and show you how to improve. And I need you to read this book. This is 4 things, right? And so learn the things that aren't valuable, that you shouldn't spend any time on, the not important, not urgent stuff. Learn the things that are important and make sure that you got those dialed in. Have an advisor, somebody to help you understand the situation. You're stuck in your head. The only thing you know is the stuff between your ears. And there's a whole lot more outside of that than what I have. But get an advisor. And when you say read the book, constantly learn. There's great books out there. They're written every year. But I mean, you can go back to In Search of Excellence and Good to Great and, all of the historically really good books. If you look at just Google the top 20 business books, and you should be reading those. If you're the leader, if you're running a business, that's your field. That's what you should be reading.
Right. And there's so many out there. And people don't even have the excuse of, I don't like to read. Now there's audiobooks, right? So there's so many you can Gosh, I can multitask. I do dishes and listen to podcasts sometimes. I mean, there's just no excuse anymore. You emphasize clarity and generosity as strategic tools. And why are those two especially crucial in 2025?
Well, they're especially crucial for leadership. Clarity, again, if you want to hit your target, you need it defined in its tightest detail. I like to play golf. I played competitive golf for a little while. And when the golfer gets on the tee, they don't say, I want to hit the fairway. They say, I want to hit that leaf on that tree 200 yards from now. That's the clarity that they want. That's where my target is. And so that's what you want to get in your business. What are you trying to achieve? How can I get to that level of clarity? Now, the likelihood is you might need to bring some people in to help you with that level of clarity. But I think you have to have that. And then you've got to be willing to shift and adjust because we're still figuring out what the pandemic brought to us, right? There is no super clarity on like, oh yeah, we're past that. This is how it works anymore. I think we're still figuring it out. But that, the internet, when it first came out, was the same way, right? When nobody knew what this thing was for 10, 12 years. In fact, think about how the internet is being used today. Social media, the way it is today, didn't really show up until 2015, 16 or so. And so the internet, the .com boom was in 2000, 2001. So it took 15 years to kind of work through that.
Right.
And kind of get some normalcy and understanding of that. It might take that long to get through the pandemic issues.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, that's really good. John, let's, we've talked about hiring the right person. And I use in my leadership training and my executive coaching, like you have to determine if someone is not performing, you have to ask yourself, is this a cognitive issue? Maybe they exaggerated themselves on their resume. Is this a training issue? Is this a behavioral conduct issue? How important is training? And do you have any stories or any advice for business owners about the type of training that they do?
Two things. One, I didn't really just generosity before, and I would tell you that a generous leader doesn't necessarily have to throw money around. That isn't the point, right? Generous leader pays attention. Generous leader learns, understands, knows, listens, embraces ideas and concepts. I mean, I think that's why generosity is so important. When you talk about, I'm going to have to ask you to replace that question because
that's okay. No, I'm glad you touched on generosity because it is so vital. And I've told a story, so I'll be very brief. But our team in federal law enforcement, we would have volunteer days, and one time they worked a soup kitchen, and I had to be in D.C. And unfortunately, because of a flight delay, I didn't make it. I walked in, they all gathered for a social after working all day. I had never seen our team so unified. They were elated. It was like a total dopamine rush. And in my mind, I didn't say anything to them. I just listened to their stories of who they met, what they did. But I thought, oh my God, this is part of the missing link right here is encouraging charity and allowing it to happen. It's one thing to, like you said, throw some money. That's not real depth. But they were out there meeting people, working like a soup kitchen and things. It was so impactful.
Yeah.
There's a joy that comes back to the giver when you do that. I have goosebumps right now about that story because I serve here at the Portland Rescue Mission for a couple different reasons. And, there, but for the grace of God, go I. But the ability to make a difference in those people's lives and the gratitude and the appreciation that comes back, that just makes my heart fill, right? And that's a joy, that's an emotion that you can't buy. You have to do it.
Yeah, and that's wonderful. But John, the question was really about training, and we talked about hiring the right people. But what's your advice to especially small businesses? As you don't have some training program, maybe officially, that you can send them to. What advice would you give people on training their employees?
Well, training is one of the highest value returns on investment that you can do. So you've probably heard of the E-Myth by Michael Gerber, and he talks about the 3 stages of a business in order, right? He talks about the entrepreneur, the manager, and the technician. And one of the things we teach our guys is my clients, right, is to, we need to offload those low value tasks because I should be working on the high value tasks. Well, they understand what the low value tasks are because they've already been doing them. But interestingly enough, they don't always have clarity on what the high value tasks are. And so when you talk about training and systems and processes, those are high value tasks because now that training system that you've built, you can leverage it with 50 people. And the return on investment with 50 employees is gigantic, whereas you only had to build the training system one time. So if you're the leader, training, getting to know your people and your team and systems and processes, those are the things that make the big difference in your business.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say something, Ron, so I was like, I don't want to jump in.
Well,
but
I have stories as well, but I'm listening.
He's holding back today, John.
Okay.
So you can shine. No, but I didn't, same with me on the volunteering. We used to volunteer when I worked at Bank of America at the Oregon Food Bank.
Mm-hmm.
And same thing. Like I remember one time after they had the Oregon Food Bank will put bags on people's doorsteps and you can fill it with cans and then they go collect all the bags at a certain date. And we were sorting through them. But it was, my executive manager was there, like everyone was there. And we were so bonded after that. It was a great experience. So there really is something to it. And so I'm glad that came up in this conversation. Pivoting back to, I want to talk about leadership lessons and really the human side, which we've just been touching on. After 40 years advising leaders under pressure, what's the biggest truth that you've learned about human leadership?
We've all got this ego thing that is, what's it about me, right? I'd like to have this done. I want this done. Mm-hmm. The business is really a separate entity, and that's why the IRS has set it up in that fashion. And that whether you're the owner of the business or the leader of the business, you are supporting the business, not you. And sometimes we get tied into, it's me, this is what I want. And that happens in a lot of places. So you need to focus on what's right for the business, because the business, it might not be right just for you. And the one thing I think that is most important for a large variety of people, some people are really intuitive and can respond with spontaneity and do it really, really remarkably well, but most people can't. And so it's learning the art of the pause. Like, how do I pause instead of just responding and reacting, right? Because so we've got stimulus and response. There's a little space of time in between. And the better you use that space of time, the more effective your results are going to be. And sometimes, it's a hot, when you talk about the emotional issues, scenarios, those are challenging. Those are more challenging. And sometimes you just, somebody wants to talk to you right now and they've got some anger or some frustration. And you say, listen, that's important. But I can't give it the time it needs right now. So I need to pause and let's pick it up this afternoon. Let's find a way to come up with the right level of response instead of spontaneously delivering the wrong response.
Mm-hmm. There's something to that. Ron loves the psychology aspect of it. He's got something up his sleeve, I can tell.
Yeah, no, I do study a lot. I do executive coaching, John. So we delve into the psychology of the brain and brain functionality. But in anticipation, John, you'll appreciate this, of this interview, I was talking to someone this week, and basically we're bidding on some contracts. And almost every contract calls for either Myers-Briggs or DISC or, True Colors, one of the personality assessments. And so I was arranging for a team member to take this training, and someone said to me, well, you're really into this. Wouldn't you like to take that training yourself? And I said, you know what? I've got to make myself start becoming CEO or king. I can't keep being a pawn and see the company grow. So do you ever have to blatantly explain, using your chest analogy, when you're meeting with a small business owner, let's say, do you use that analogy and do you tell them you're being a pawn, or do you have a story on that?
I would say that I revert to chess. I don't talk about the pawn thing, but the concept of them working on the wrong thing. In the beginning of every engagement, coaching is relatively new, and I'm working with small business owners, so it might be the first time they've ever had a coach. And so we'll go through and we'll lay out what it is that we need to work on and what they're going to do this next week. And then the following week they'll come back and I'll say, well, how'd it go? And they'll say, well, I didn't get it done. And I'm going to say, why? And they're, well, because this happened and this happened and this happened. And I just say, okay, so what you're doing is you're slipping we're trying to break those patterns and you're slipping back into those patterns. And if you don't break those patterns, we're not going to ever get anywhere. And often that is a light bulb moment for them. And then I'll say, okay, so if this happens again, what should I do? Right? They get to push their own button, right? They get to push their own button as to what the consequences of them not following through with their responsibilities.
I like
That's
that.
powerful. I could see the aha moment for sure happening with that. And maybe a little shame there for a minute, which I feel like drives. I always loved when I had employees who were really hard on themselves, because what I would see is they're self-correcting. They just need a little, okay, here's what you did. And then they would, oh my gosh. And you watch them self-correct, and then you don't have to get on them as much, right? Because you can pull away and watch them lead themselves. You're there to redirect. That is a beautiful thing. But I would say the percentage of people that are actually like that, like 25 or less.
Well, it's a spread. It's a spread.
Yeah.
Self-managing. That's what you really want, is a self-managing team, because if they can take care of their thing, then you can go work on the other stuff.
Right. That is ideal. What's the real difference between tactical and strategic leadership? And why would confusing the two or eventually hurt teams?
Okay, so this is another great question. The strategy is the path that we're going to take. Like, we're going to take the north path up the mountain to get to the top, right? Or we're going to implement a social media or a new marketing campaign, and that's how we're going to achieve our objectives. That's the strategy. And you have to have the strategy, but the tactics are the actual little details. It's like how do you do that, right? What are you supposed to bring with you on the trip up the mountain? When are you supposed to log into social media? When are you supposed to put it on? Those are the tactics. Those are the individual steps. And what you find is that you've got people that understand strategy really well, and some people that are really good at tactics. Like, if you don't lay it out for them, they don't know how to do it. But you don't see a lot of people that have both, where they can literally walk through, this is the steps. And now this is a place where I kind of spend my time, is in that translation from strategy into tactics. How do we make it simple so they can actually execute and get it done?
Yeah.
I like that.
I know, me too. I'm having aha moments right now. I think it's amazing. This is invaluable information, John. I love that, because Ron and I come from the private sector. Ron comes from the public sector, and we both led teams. Oh gosh, combined over 50 years, right? So it's really cool to hear an outside perspective. And then I'm thinking back while you're talking about these 125 episodes that we've discussed leadership and discussed all of this. It's all coming together. So thank you very much for this conversation. It's been great.
Well, you're welcome. I'm happy to be here and happy to share. I was going to make one other point, because the other chess analogy that I make is, because somebody will say, in the game of business, what's the queen and what's the pawn? The queen is clarity, right? If you have the clarity, you can accomplish. If you don't have it, it's really, really hard. And the pawn's the daily habits. Like, what are the things I have to do every day to get to that particular place? The pawn is but the pawn is what wins the game. If you're up a pawn, it gets the end rank, it becomes a queen, you win the game. It's just that much.
Very important.
Hey, John, let's do this. If something comes to mind, give us on, as we're closing out, do you have a good success story where you helped, whether small or large, but primarily, I think a small business story would be great, where you use these principles and you were able to turn a business around and they begin to prosper and make sales or whatever the case may be. You got a good story, a good happy ending story. God knows we could use one today.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I like to work in the, I have a corporate world in the commercial construction space. And so I like to work with the contractors and trade space. So I was working with a painting company, commercial painting company. So this isn't just, they're not painting houses. And they were once again kind of stuck where they were at. They were doing a couple $1 million a year and stuck. And we began to do the analysis of the team. We used a lot of the behavioral assessments to help us understand that. And then we began to put together systems and processes and key performance indicators for each of the team members so that they could actually measure how well they were doing. Because that's what you want. They want, like, I'm doing well, I'm not doing well. If I'm not doing well, what I need to do to get better.
Exactly.
Well, what's really interesting, and if you have to challenge somebody, lay them off, terminate them, that is not a pleasant experience. I don't know anybody that likes to. I mean, bonuses are fun to give out. Those are great.
Yeah.
And if you like doing it, you're kind of a sicko.
Well, and so what happens when you have the right metrics, the right measurements, people will start to see where their performance really lies. And they'll start to find out that their performance is not measuring up, in which case then they have to decide, because now they're not arguing about what the problem is or who the problem is. They know it. It's right there in front of them. And then they have to decide, do I want to change? Do I want to do the work to get better? That's not always a yes.
Yeah.
And so in this particular business, one of the project managers, as they're going through their results and measuring them, they find out that they're not doing, the boss has been on them for a while, but they realize that it's really them, right? It's not the boss, and boss isn't subjective. And so they make a decision to leave the company. And so now we go into the process where we do all the same work, but how do we bring somebody on board? And we bring on literally an A-level player, like a young professional that was just had it on the ball. And they tripled the revenues in 3 years. In 1 year, they went from $2 million to $6 million in 12 months. And that's what that one little thing was holding them back. Because every time they tried to go forward, something brought them back.
And so that was the key performance indicators.
Yeah.
Like having that in place. Wow.
Right. So key performance in project management, on time, what area, how often do you have to rework?
Yes.
There's a whole litany of things that you can keep track of and measure.
Right.
And so a project manager is responsible for making sure all that stuff happens when it's supposed to happen. And they could find out that it was their management skills that weren't good enough.
Yeah.
And they could learn and grow and spend more time and energy, or they could leave, and they decided to leave. And so the leader didn't have to have that termination discussion, and ended up with the results. And I think after the end of a year, he decided that he was going to run his business from Savannah, Georgia. So he was based in Newport Beach, California. And he built his team, and they ran everything the way he wanted it to, so he could run it almost like a part-time business from Savannah, Georgia. Yeah, he moved across the country, and he would come back a couple weeks, a month, and check in on things. But
that's a huge success story.
I was there last weekend.
Savannah's beautiful, right?
It's a great place. Yeah, good call on his part.
Yes, absolutely. I wanted to say, I do feel that there is a gap because with the KPIs, I lived in the banking, I was a bank leader. And so a lot of it was about sales, right? So, and those are very easy to measure. Once I left leading like actual bank retail branches and went into more of an operational team, I found that there was a gap where the performance, really, there weren't KPIs in place for back office employees. And I'm talking big banks.
Yeah.
It was very difficult to manage because I was used to my daily sales report. I could see how people were performing. I, heard it in person. But when you don't have a KPI coming to you, it is very difficult. So I love, especially, and I'm talking big national banks, but for you, talking about with the small businesses, oh my gosh, I can only imagine that gap is huge.
It is. And, here's the thing, you can't do it all at once, right? So the rule is, what's the most important thing that we need to fix? What's the first KPI that we need to employ there? And let's just do them one at a time, right? I don't want to wait until I find up 10 or 20. What's the most important thing? What's the most important KPI? Let's get that done. And literally, when that's done, you'll start to see improvement in that particular, right? Because what gets measured gets improved, and you'll start to see improvement. Right. And that'll buy you the time to go do the next one and the next one. Everybody should have at least one KPI.
Yes.
John, I was coaching someone recently, and they were concerned going back to turnover. You talked about this superstar that came in, and this company was really worried about turnover, and they saw it as a loss. But I told them in the situations, I said, the way you're framing this, you've got two serious problems in your office, and turnover can be a beautiful thing if you take the right steps and you bring in the right people. So they are working toward getting rid of a couple of people. And I think it's going to help immensely. I know that you never want a lot of turnover, but if you are trying to restructure and make some changes, sometimes that's just the reality. You got to, as we said, put the aces in spaces. They've got to align, have the ability. So yeah, I appreciate that story. That's very impactful.
Every turnover, it feels bad because that's a resource that you knew you could count on everything, but it's an opportunity to upgrade the team.
That's exactly right.
Amen. Seriously. Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think that's so important. People fear attrition or turnover, right? But it's
you're always afraid of losing your key guys, right?
Yeah,
You finally get a guy that can get things done, and you can count on him, and you can trust him. And for whatever reason, he has to leave, and he might leave because he gets another opportunity. But more often than not, it's because I got to go to the East Coast because my family's sick, or something has to happen here, and there isn't a no, don't go, and there isn't an amount of money that will keep them to stay. They've got to go take care of what they got to go take care of. So it's hard, but it's an opportunity as well.
Yeah, I love it. It's that mindset. You have to have the right mindset with it.
Yeah. So, John, this is a lot to take in. I think this is going to help a lot of people, and I certainly got some great ideas, and it's got some wheels turning in my mind. And one of the most important things is I think you've showed us that leadership isn't just about grinding harder. It's about strategy, vision, and clarity. Is that fair?
Absolutely. It's not about working harder. And most small business owners, that's what they think it has to take, right? I'm going to work 12 hours. I'm going to work 16 hours a day. That you could do that forever. It won't get any better, right? It's really about how do I operate smarter?
Yeah, exactly.
On that, I just have to say, and I'm not going to mention names here, but I know someone who opened a restaurant and was working for the first year and a half, working 7 days straight, and is now divorced. The business is thriving, but the marriage ended, right? And so there has to be that balance, and that's that work hard. I have to be here grinding every day, but it's really just not sustainable.
I teach this process called whole life leadership, which is realizing that life is about life. It's not about business. That business is the supporting vehicle to live the life you want to live. And, getting your business to work while you have to sacrifice your family, that's a trade, and that's not a good trade. There's this concept of work-life balance that people use all the time. And again, if you're a minimum wage and you can clock in and clock out at 5, I think you can turn off business until tomorrow morning. But if you're a business leader or a business owner, that's not happening. So instead of balance, which is sort of this scale type thing, we look at this word called harmony, right? So how do we live and operate all of the things with all of the people that our business touches, that we integrate? How do we operate in harmony? How do we create an orchestra tune and that allows me to do what I need to do in business, but keeps my family informed and aware of, because guess what? They are going to be huge beneficiaries of what this business delivers, right? So they need to know that they play a role in that. And sometimes they have to be supportive. I also know that sometimes I got to go take a vacation. So we just need to, and when I think about harmony, we think about all of the stakeholders, right? So you have your family, they definitely have a stake in the business. Then you have your employees, your peers, your service providers, your customers, and then if you have any investors in your business, you've got to, all of those have to operate in harmony if you're going to be successful.
I love that harmony. That is huge. That really resonates. John, this has been wonderful. And, just like a strong chess game, it's about thinking ahead while staying human in the moment. We've talked a lot about that, which I love. Listeners, check out John's book, Checkmate, Translating Ideas into Money for even more insights.
All right, everybody, be the leader you're meant to be.
We'll see you next week. Thank you, John.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, guys.
Our pleasure.
The Dirty Side of Leadership podcast is brought to you by Forward Operations. If you'd like to book Ron or Kristen for speaking events, training, or executive coaching, visit forwardoperations.com. Be the leader you're meant to be.